Hi. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tally, Alan's daughter. Welcome to Alan's virtual memorial service. We're sad that due to the current circumstances that we are unable to meet in person, but I like to think Alan would have appreciated celebrating his life virtually, in that geography would not be a prohibitive factor for people to attend. For today's program, we've prepared some recorded videos and a slideshow. If you need to manage your time, it'll be 45 minutes long. Following that, we will try to open it up to sharing some live comments. You're also welcome to share messages in the chat throughout the memorial. Thank you for being here in celebration of his life.
My brother Alan was an easygoing guy. He was thoughtful and caring and patient. There was a calmness about Alan that was humble and easy to be with. As I think back over his life and how he lived it, I think there are a couple of things to celebrate. First, he did what he loved. I don't know that he decided to become an artist when he was a child. I think it's more likely he was interested in electronics and studied it, and things developed from there. He wanted to build things, new things. He wanted to try things. Over time, he developed more and more skills, and ultimately he was an engineer and a sculptor and a craftsman. The concepts, of course, were important, but I think he enjoyed making the pieces. I think he loved working with his hands and knowing he was making it exactly the way he wanted it. He continued to grow his entire life. As times changed, his ideas evolved, and he made different pieces, more pieces, exploring different themes. He made over 500 pieces, a number that surprised even him, I know, when he looked back at it. Finally, I think we should celebrate Alan's sense of humor. He made his points gently with a smile. You can see it in his art. There was a lightness to Alan, a playfulness. And it's something that I particularly admire and I think is distinct to Alan Rath.
Alan Rath, my brother, was the kindest, smartest, and most creative guy I've ever known. But he was also quite independent, adventuresome, and probably what some people don't realize, pretty well-rounded, really. I would like to share with you some of my experiences with my brother, from going back to a very young age up through, say, college, where, it was kind of the formative years. And I think that even though I didn't realize it then, I think it indicates some of the future about him that he was going to have. For background, Alan is 5 years younger than me. A little bit of a gap, but we're two boys, and we did spend quite a bit of time together when we were young. The kindest, gentlest, came at a very young age. I remember when, little boys catch fireflies. Alan was the kind of guy that after the first night, when you realized they died the next day, even when you put holes in the jar, he didn't want to do that anymore. He'd do only a catch and release. But not only gentle, but truly through his whole life, a gentleman. And I think that goes back to that our father, who came from old world Europe, was truly a gentleman. And I think it left an impression on Alan. And to this day, I think he was truly a gentleman. But the biggest thing is he's probably the smartest guy I ever knew. You know, and it started at a young age. It didn't seem strange at the time, but and when he was like 10, he was into building rockets. Now, you know, these days, in later years, there were actually rocket kits that you could buy. Alan was building rockets with a chemistry set, creating his own gunpowder and his own propulsion systems. Kind of crazy, but you know, a few of them exploded on the launch pad, but you know, we were all smart enough to stand back. But you know, he did a lot of kind of pushing the envelope type things. After the rockets became fireworks. Sometimes I wonder how he got away with it, but you know, I credit actually myself and my sister for actually paving a pretty good path. Neither of us got in a whole lot of trouble, and by the time Alan came along 5 years later, he had pretty easy goings and had a lot of independence, maybe that we didn't have. So he did explore a lot on his own, do a lot of things on his own, kind of pushing the limits. Our parents trusted young Alan. I remember, you know, sometime after the fireworks stage of his life, my mother decided to remodel the basement. My father wasn't handy. My mother was an artist. Our mother was an artist, and she did all the design, all the materials procurement. I'd supplied the labor, and Alan did the electrical. Now, I think he was 12, if I remember correctly, but he did all the circuitry, figured out all the switches, pulled all the wire, and brought it to the box. My mother did get an electrician to wire up the box and check all of his work, but everything was to code. And as I said, just at 12 years of age. I didn't really realize how special that might be. But if, this electrical it led to electronics. Later on, with his doing light shows and involved with concerts and bands, and you know, really the presentation, the art of music and light that I really think was some of his early expressions as an artist. But as I said, one of the smartest guys I ever known. He graduated in 1978 from our high school. I think graduated in class around 500. He was the valedictorian, and he went on to MIT, graduating in 82. And I think that some of, back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, some very early work in robotics that MIT was doing, really you see in some of his art in later years. Alan, a really smart guy. But he's also very independent, a maverick. Often following quite different paths, or we always actually followed a different path, but sometimes the contrast was very interesting. I remember coming home one time for a Christmas holiday. My wife Grace and I got off the plane in Cincinnati. Alan was waiting there at the gate. That's back when you could still go to the gate to greet people. And there he was, home from college. He had burlap pants, knee-high moccasins, and long hair with Bo Derek braids. That Christmas holiday, Grace had to braid his hair just so we'd be able to get to the parties on time. He did march to a different drummer. Truly a free spirit. Most of you probably don't realize, though, that his sort of an adventurer and actually, believe it or not, enjoyed many athletic activities. My sister mentioned to me the other day, as we were thinking about things that happened over the years, Alan Rath, at a very young age, at the tricycle time, took off from the house, went, I think, better than a half mile away, down one of the steepest hills you'd ever want to ride. Certainly couldn't ride in a tricycle. Ended up in the ditch, and some neighbor brought him home. But I think his approach was he just wanted to see how far he could go, what he could see. Uh, I don't know if he got in any trouble for that, but he did probably venture out many more times, maybe not to that hill. He swam competitively as a young guy, but he didn't like the getting up so early thing and getting in a cold swimming pool and working out. But he did continue and do a lot of athletic activities. Later, around the high school time, I think it was, or early college, he took up road cycling, and he did the RAGBRAI, the great race, great ride across the state of Iowa, 4 or 5 day ride, camping at night. And then at the end of that, I don't know how many 100 miles that was. It was because he was in the neighborhood. I was close to Missouri and my sister was in St. Louis. He then rode on to St. Louis to visit with them on a bike, another 250 miles, I think it was. After college, he took a break, backpacked through Europe. And I know I was very jealous hearing some of his experiences. I think he took quite a while. It wasn't the usual 4-week trip. I don't remember particularly how long, but I think it was pretty extended. He was hanging out in Greece, sleeping on the beach on some island somewhere in the Greek Isles. Yeah, pretty adventuresome. Most, a lot of us dream of doing it, and we just don't end up doing it. And then I know until the MS slowed him down, he and Mia enjoyed a lot of travel around, to all corners of the world, back and forth to Asia. And I know from talking to him more recently that travel is one of the things he really missed as the MS slowed him down. But my fondest memories of Alan were in this, at least concerning sports, is for years we would do a guy's trip to Lake Tahoe to ski and gamble. And this is quite a while ago. It's before either of us had children. So we were young enough to be able to both ski and gamble. And one of my memories of that is, of course, he's the mathematician. So what's the first thing he does? For gambling, he'd study what are the best odds in the casino. The best odds is if you play it well, it's craps. So we played craps. He taught me how to play craps. I wish I'd kept it up. I've kind of forgotten that. But back then, at Lake Tahoe, it was $2 tables. We had a lot of fun doing that. In the later years, after we did have kids, we actually got to take our boys to Lake Tahoe and have a couple of days of skiing and boarding. And unfortunately, that Tahoe sun was just blasting, reflecting off the snow. We didn't use enough sunscreen. Missed a day of skiing, had to go home early, but the real problem was when we got home and the moms found out how poorly the dads had done. I think in later trips, Mia went along. But after Alan's, later in life, Alan's MS started to affect him. We had spent, over the last several years, a lot more time talking, catching up. Always family was very important to Alan. It was evident his love for Mia, for Tally and Woody, and more recently, the grandkids, Theodore and Jasper. All of these things later in that life, also we talked about all those things that you realize that you learned from your parents that maybe you'd forgotten or never realized along the way. But more practical things too. He was into quite a bit the markets. We would compare notes and actually compete. I lost many bottles of scotch to him in that competition. He was very good in investments. And in politics, not only on the national scene, but too, with his California and my Texas, there was quite a contrast, and it made a good debate, but also, the talk of the fragility of our democracy. But he never lost his dry sense of humor. I know my sister related to me after recently that for years, many years before Alan was diagnosed with MS, I'd actually been fundraising for MS And of course, then after Alan was diagnosed, you know, while you first go to family in these kinds of efforts, of course I didn't go any more to Alan. And his comment to his sister was, yeah, well, at least this gets me out of that fundraising deal. So he kept his humor, his sense of humor about it. But as the condition deteriorated, you know, he gave me updates. It was hard to sometimes hear about what the disease was doing, was progressing. Alan had researched everything. The scientist in him, the medical knowledge that he developed was probably one of the most that any patient would ever learn. But he tried to figure out if there was a way that it could be beat. But in the end, we don't have a way to beat MS. He's in a better place now. Alan, we love you. Bless you.
Hi, Tom Patchett here. I'm standing at our house in Carol's garden. She is a wonderful, wonderful gardener and has created a wonderful space for us to relax and sit and talk and ponder. Done a lot of pondering about Alan, of course, in the last few days, and he was an amazing guy. His work was fascinating to me. Not only was it intelligent, but it was witty. And me being a comedy writer, I appreciated the subtlety of his humor, but I don't think that's what he was going for. He was an engineer. He's much more interested in the technology and the making his own circuit breakers, and just an amazing, amazing person. But he, I saw his work at the Minneapolis Museum of Art in a small show when I was there one time. Didn't know who he was, but then found out who represented him and bought a couple pieces and then met him. And we became very, very good friends. And he was always fascinated with words because he didn't think that he used them well. He thought writing was really amazing, and I thought, well, he's got, you know, E equals MC squared all over the place going on, and but he was an incredible fun guy. And I remember one time that Carol and I and we went deep sea fishing off of Morro Bay with a guy that I knew that was an expert fisherman. And Alan was catching all the fish. Like about 45 minutes in, he had about 4 big salmon. Illegal? No, probably not. But he, I said, how come you're catching all the fish, Alan? And he said, well, I figured out how deep they are. I said, what do you mean, how deep they are? He said, well, the seals are attacking them at about 20 feet. And if that's where you want the bait to be, and with the movement of the ship, how much line do you need for the bait to be at 20 feet? I said, well, thank you very much for sharing. We appreciate that. But he was so much fun to be with. And I loved to make him laugh, and he really seemed to enjoy the friendship. And so it goes. I miss him. We went to the last show he did, the one in San Jose, which was so beautiful. I was so happy for him that he got that show, that there was a catalog of it. He wasn't well, but he went and he enjoyed it immensely. And pretty much, you know, in the last part of the last year with the coronavirus. We haven't been able to get up there and see him, but we love Mia and we love him and we love Tali and her kids and her husband and Woody. I hope we will continue to see all of you. And in the meantime, I'll be thinking a lot about him, as I always do. And we hope that you know that he'll always be around us in one way or another. And we loved him. Thank you.
Alan was my best friend. Even though we never talked more than once a week or every other week, and we never socialized outside of work. But he still was my best friend. He has moved me more than any other artist or engineer or entrepreneur. He has influenced me more in that way, but also in a lot of ways. He's matured my personality. And I loved what Alan gave me, and I admire and respect him, and I hope I can share some of what made him important to the world. And I really regret that I don't get another 20 or 30 years to spend with Alan like I thought I was going to, but I'm going to live for the rest of my life on, what he gave me. And I hope the world remembers him as an artist. And I hope the people, the few people that he touched, and that he trusted and he let inside, will somehow help the world remember him for the great person he was too.
So Alan, with his long flowing hair, got to MIT and he brought his electronics and he would be doing these projects like a lot of us, but his actually worked. I was excited. It's like, wow, we could get pot that actually gets you high. And he said, oh yeah, pot. It's like a 3-year thing. I'm already over it. It's like, wow, who is this guy? And he was sort of a DIY guy he took control and doing things himself his own way. A lot of us were off trying to figure out how to make money and do all this. He said, nah, I'll just learn the technology and do my art. And he did. He was the first really to move to California of our whole group. And I bought one of his sculptures, what's one of his behind. I think it was like his third or his fourth. And he sent it back to Boston. We proudly displayed, here's our friend who's now in California doing art. And every time one of us would move out to California, he would welcome us in. And his ability to keep friends over his whole lifetime is just amazing. There's so many of us, and it was all really Alan's sort of keeping at it. Whenever I needed sort of an inspiration of sort of art folk, he was always open and sharing. We wanted to make a sculpture of the World Wide Web to give to the Library of Congress, because we were going to give the copy of the bits, but what does it look like? So I said, Alan, what does it look like? And he worked with Art Medlar to come up with this amazing sculpture that then was displayed in the Library of Congress for 10 years and is now on permanent display at the Internet Archive. We wanted to make a bookmobile to go and give away books. And it's like, I don't know how to make any of this look. So I went over and he just said, okay, what's the story? Okay, it's free books and it's 1 million books coming soon. And so we just put that on and it became sort of the icon of the Internet Archive and this whole project. It was great. He did other things. When we were going and putting the servers within this new church, we wanted to go and, give it some substance. He said, don't put them on the floor, raise them up and take the middle one and raise it up a little bit more. And we did. And he was just completely right. He was always sharing with his ideas with a crystal clear view of what was really going on. Alan, we'll miss you.
Hi, I'm Todd Hosfeld. I have a contemporary art gallery in San Francisco. where I've had the pleasure and honor to exhibit Alan's artwork. I first saw his work in 1990, 30 years ago. A really different art world then. I walked into the San Jose Museum, and in the lobby there were several pieces by Alan that were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. In 1990, there were starting to be more and more videos exhibited, more and more installations that used technology, a few sculptures that used technology, but these were really different than anything. They were elegant and they were formal, but they were funny and they were witty and they had a lot of personality. They seemed alive. A few years later, I met Alan, and of course, the first thing I think anyone noticed about Alan was how incredibly intelligent he was. And probably the second thing is how funny and fun and warm. Working with him has been such a pleasure. We've done many projects and exhibitions together. Most recently, we worked on his survey show at the San Jose Institute of Contemporary Art and the catalog that accompanied that. Every time I looked at his work, and as we were going back and looking at older pieces, I realized kind of what a pioneer he was and how talented he was. I'm gonna miss Alan very, very much, but I know that every time I look at one of his artworks, he's gonna be with me.
I had the extraordinary good fortune to work with Alan for nearly 20 years. As a teenager, discovering the field of video art, I had fallen in love with these amazing robots and kinetic sculptures by this artist, Alan Rath. I'd become obsessed with his work, and when I decided to open my own gallery, I'd asked a mutual friend, John Hanhart, then senior curator at the Guggenheim, to make an introduction. I arrived in San Francisco, a bright-eyed and inexperienced 27-year-old. A day earlier, I had met with another one of my true idols, Jim Campbell, and on this day, I arrived at the train station in Oakland, and on a bright, sunny day, I was picked up by this tall, handsomely rugged man in his pickup truck, and he rolled down the window, flashed me a big smile, and said, "Hey, I'm Alan, hop in." I'll never forget arriving to his studio. It was the playground of a mad scientist, a playpen the likes of Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. I was speechless, faced with remarkable works in motion, spinning armatures and eyeballs chaotically scanning the room. The words of Victor Frankenstein rang through my head. "It's alive! It's alive!" And at that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My world would forever be changed, and heading back to New York, I couldn't help but pinch myself. I was giddy as though I were a child again. Alan Rath. I had landed Alan freaking Rath. And together with Jim Campbell, John Simon Jr., and Stena Vasulka, Alan participated in my inaugural exhibition, Art Apparatus, and today is among the group of artists included in my 20-year retrospective 2020. I will forever be indebted and respectful of Alan's loyalty. He gave me a shot 20 years ago when I didn't have a resume to stand on, but we connected and we shared a vision of art, a similar philosophy toward the world, and a genuine love of family, and oh boy, did Alan love his family. How he spoke lovingly of Tally and Woody and his beloved Mia. I'll never forget that beautiful, warm smile and the words of encouragement at every turn and development of my gallery and my program. We did extraordinary things together, Alan, and I will always hold you deep, deep, deep in my heart. Farewell, my friend.
I'd like to say a few words too, Alan, before I say some words about him. I first saw your work in the mid-'80s in San Francisco in a number of exhibitions south of Market, and I'd never seen anything like it before. I knew a little bit about video art at the time and even less about sculpture, but I'd never seen any work that had fused those two things together like you had. Incorporating the kind of precision of the electronics with the playfulness of your video, both your video, I think, and your cabling system. And your technique was clear, basically. Do it all yourself and don't hide anything. And I was amazed and I was envious. But it was those early shows that really inspired me to take the leap to become an artist. And I want to thank you for that. If you look at my earlier work, you can see how your work inspired mine. Sometimes when I look back on it, I think about it as my Alan Rath period. I first really met Alan in 1990. We were in an exhibition together at SF MoMA, place right next to each other. It was actually the first exhibition I'd ever been in. And we became friends shortly after that, seeing each other kind of periodically over the last 30 years. It's kind of nice that we're in an exhibition together in New York right now with our work right next to each other again. It's obviously happened many times over the last 30 years. Among other things, Alan and I had a truly nerdy relationship. We'd get together after maybe not seeing each other for 6 months, and within 30 seconds or so, we'd be talking about power supplies or microprocessors or speakers or video monitors. I remember once talking to Alan about his work Rover, which was an autonomous small vehicle that would drive around the gallery, and it would actually charge itself, find its charging location, and charge itself when it needed to be charged. At the time, and I still think this was extraordinary in the 1990s to have figured out how to do that and to implement it. And this tiny aspect of the work was more profound than what almost all artists were doing at the time with robotics. And I remember asking him why he did it, why he had it self-charge. And he said so that the gallery staff wouldn't have to plug it in. And that was so Alan. He did things that because they needed to be done. He didn't fetishize the technology. Everything was done for a reason. Another time we were talking about a piece that I was working on, and after a few minutes, he honed right in on it, and he made a suggestion that was made the work a lot more human-like. And that was typical Alan, very generous, very supportive. Thanks for changing the direction of my life, old friend. And I'll see you in my dreams.
Almost everyone now has a cell phone in their pocket that can do just about anything on it. Even though Alan was the last person in our family to get one, he always marveled about how much the technology had improved since his MIT age. But long before Google or Siri, at our house we had, "Hey, Alan." We used to call him the walking encyclopedia. He was our personal onboard navigator when we needed a map, our tip calculator when we went out to eat, our Shazam when we listened to music, our Google Translate when we traveled to Europe, sometimes even in Japan, our Wikipedia when we wanted to know the difference between a pipe and a tube, or how far is the moon, and when was Leonardo da Vinci's birthday? And of course, most of the time, he was our Apple Pay. He could even show us new recipes. And just like our phones, he couldn't cook them. That's our family joke. The only time Alan comes to the kitchen is to take out the garbage. He was just that brilliant. I don't know anyone, people of all ages, some don't even speak the same language, who met him and didn't love the guy. When he met Tally and Woody, they were about 3 and 5. He has always loved them, as much, if not more, than any father could. And when he got his grandbaby twins, he was so happy and thrilled to experience the baby stages. Though he has never changed a diaper in his life, he really enjoyed every nanosecond with them. Alan lived his life like building his sculpture. The engineer part, orderly, planned out, and precise, but always mixed in with surprising element of intended romance and humor from the artist side of him. Alan was nothing but kind, sweet, responsible, and thoughtful. We had the best year of our life with him. And even though we must say goodbye to his hardware, the unique and exceptional artist, the wonderful friend to so many, the father, the husband, the loving gong gong, that's what the twins called him, his software lives on, like a guardian angel, somewhere in the cloud. His love for us was so strong that it will last to infinity and beyond. Through his work and these beautiful memories, I know he will always be loved and remembered by everyone who knew him.
Hi, Alan. I miss you. While I've struggled to adjust living life without you in it, I've been remembering you through the things that you taught me. You were very considerate of other people. I remember you and Mom sharing that you wanted to get married, but only if Woody and I were comfortable with the idea. Needless to say, we were ecstatic and even threw you a ceremony at home with Woody at the piano and me as the officiant before you legally tied the knot. You were open-minded and accepting. When I was in high school, you came home early from a trip and caught me having a party. Rather than reacting, you were super chill and just went upstairs. Maybe you didn't mind and were just letting us be teenagers. In any case, thanks for not embarrassing me in front of my friends. You inspired a love of learning, from gifting my first Encyclopedia Britannica set of books to teaching new vocabulary like philtrum and penultimate, by working it into everyday conversation, to racing to finish multiplication tables at the kitchen table. Learning was fun with you. You were a true example of humility. You were never the person to tell me of your accolades and accomplishments in the fine art world, but glimpses of your impact trickled down to me here and there. I learned of one of your guest lectures while I was studying at UC Berkeley and arrived to find you in a lecture hall filled with hundreds of students eager to learn about you and your work. I remember in those sorts of moments realizing, whoa, my stepdad is really smart and really cool. You cultivated my appreciation of art and culture. At a time when I preferred to binge read Harry Potter, you patiently exposed us to temples in Japan, natural wonders across the Americas, and beautiful cathedrals, museums, and other monuments across Europe. And while walking the streets of Amsterdam, you even taught me how to distinguish the difference between the smell of cigarettes and weed. And though I'm still trying to get Monty Python, I know my appreciation for bathroom humor is your doing. And most importantly, you taught me unconditional love. Though I was not your biological daughter, you never made me feel like anything less. I never got the sense that you wished I were any different than who I was. Thank you for being a true parent in every sense of the word to me. Thank you for loving me for me. I love you for you. Lately, I've been finding myself imagining that you're somewhere up there talking to Leonardo da Vinci, Albert Einstein, and Jimi Hendrix over a Diet Coke and a burger. Down here, I hope you know, we're still talking about you and remembering you. I love you.
Hi, Alan. I wrote you a letter. I hope you don't mind me sharing it. Dear Alan, growing up, you never struck me as the paternal type. You were just Alan, more like an eccentric uncle. I'm pretty sure the first time you babysat me, I ended up having to cook my own lunch because you forgot. And let's not mention the time you forgot sunscreen on our skiing trip, because that didn't end well. It used to catch me off guard when people just assumed you were my biological father. They'd say, "Yeah, I see the resemblance." And I'd say, "Really? Him?" But whenever I needed something, you were there. Whether it was building my first computer or a fully functioning Darth Vader costume for Halloween, you never let me down. And when I look back on our memories, shooting model rockets, building train sets, learning the ins and outs of automobile maintenance, these are the memories of a father and a son. I know I never called you Dad, but I'm going to now because in the end, that's what you were. So, Dad, if you're listening, know that Mom will be looked after, that I'm thankful for everything you've done, and that I love you.
David, I think my husband AJ, who's our tech support today, will unmute you now.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. I wouldn't know where to even start, but I probably wouldn't start with a 2-minute limit. Alan, I first got to his work in Chicago, which was my hometown. I'd already moved to San Francisco in 1990, but I think I saw him for the first time, his work at the museum, what we used to call the Museum of Contemptible Art in Chicago. The early career retrospective. And I was knocked out by it in every way. And then found that he actually lived in the city that I had only recently moved to, San Francisco. And our relationship began from there. Partly his connection to music and electric guitarists was really meaningful. I had gotten to work with a whole bunch of them, from Vernon Reid to Bill Frisell and then Nels Cline and others, and we connected on the musical level. And some years later, when my young son was born, I just want to say something about Alan that you all know, but he was so kind to Thelonious. There were a couple of visits to the studio, and whether he would, I don't know, Thelonious maybe was 3 or 4 or 5 or something, but fascinated with everything shiny and bright and technological and moving. And Alan sometimes would give him a broom and have him just sweep for a while. and he loved sweeping. And then he'd sit him at the workbench and give him some kind of assignment. And Thelonious, he loved those times, and I did too. My father had MS, and I kind of grew up with it. So even though my dad, when I was a young teenager and then into my early 20s, and even though my father didn't have all the therapies and opportunities that Alan did a couple of decades later, I knew that it's no picnic, and it's brutal and relentless. And I know Alan dealt with it with grace. The last thing I'll say is, I'm sorry I didn't pre-record something. This is kind of Rathian. I mean, I would have pre-recorded the pantoum that I wrote for him in the book, because that's the best I could say about Alan. And I chose the form of a pantoum, which was a Malaysian, actually started as a 15th century Malaysian dance form, because there's looping in a pantoum, there's overlapping, things come back onto themselves but are punctuated differently, lines repeat, and it's a very intricate dance. And I saw Alan's work in that way. It was a profoundly intricate dance, but it was a dance. And the way things related to each other, and his love of playfulness, wit, and movement, which is central. I guess that's where the Calder part comes. But the Rathian bit of the last week is, last week I started a surgery trial for something called a spinal cord stimulator. Here's the Rathian part of it. It has a remote control that looks like, Alan would have laughed. It has a remote control that's attached to it that looks like it was designed for people that were born in 1935. And you can turn it on, and the implant will change what the amplitude and the waveforms look like. You can go from 10 hertz to 10,000 hertz. This is all stuff that Alan would have had a deep and comic appreciation of. And it just so happens that I have this going on right now. So I was on Monday when this was done, I was thinking of Alan, and Tuesday and Wednesday of last week, I was particularly thinking of Alan because I had this hilariously Rathian device that was now attached to my body through wires that are going into my back. And I just thought he would have found it completely amusing, and as I do, but also serious. And so I feel very bonded with Alan right now, as he always liked to show the chords is one thing in the sculpture. You know, a lot of electric artists want to hide all the business. He loved showing the stagecraft and the business, and that was also a beautiful thing about his work. So that's my improvised send-off, but I will never forget him. And I'm lucky to be able to live with his work. Thanks.
That was really beautiful. Much appreciated. Really funny. It was very Alan. I think going next on the list, AJ Honey, someone named Cal.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi.
Can everyone hear?
Yeah.
Yep. Great. This has been so beautiful, and I really needed this. You know, I got to know Alan better the past 5 years, and he was a hero of mine and changed my life work. And he was brilliant and generous and kind and such a rascal, and just the smartest guy in the room every time. And you don't find that a lot in the art world. There's a competitive energy because we're all broke and we're all struggling all the time. And a fun inside joke we had with each other is that my gallery was under his gallery. And so in San Francisco, literally, physically, the gallery I exhibit in is under his. And I told him one day I'd be above his, but we didn't get to live to witness that. And that guy is so brave, and it was humbling and inspiring. And I missed him so much. You know, during the lockdown, God, it just broke my heart. And I'm such a baby about this stuff, but, you know, we would have lunch at his studio all the time, and he always had a chore for me. It was so fun to help him with stuff. And he'd be like, can you move these boxes, or can you set up my drill press? And I mean, don't set your drill press up this way, you set it up this way. And we'd sort of have a back and forth little haggle, like a couple of old queens, I used to call us, as we sort of dodder around his studio. And this guy literally was texting me 2 days before he left the planet, trying to help me with something, and not even mentioning where he was at with his health and his body. You know, I aspire to have that kind of energy at that part of my life. And that energy with Alan, it's here, and it doesn't go away just because he went away. It ripples out amongst us. It's out amongst all the students he talked to, and it's going to grow and flourish. You know, and that energy keeps giving and growing and building, and as the work does, and it lives on through all the gifts that he gave us. And you know, that's right out of physics. That energy never leaves the planet. It just transmutes. And I think that's the way I think of someone like Alan. And God, all those great conversations we had in his studio as we both struggled with this eccentric field we both work in, and a couple of eccentrics clucking away. It's some of the best memories of my life, and what a gift to have had him as a friend. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cal. It's funny because Alan never really gave Woody or me chores to do in the home, but it's funny to hear how he saved chores for his friends. And in case you're wondering, these are Theo and Jasper, Gong Gong's grand twins. They just wanted to say hi. Say hi, guys. They're gonna be 2 next week. Yeah, say hi. This is for Gong Gong. Gong Gong? Yeah, it's for Gong Gong. Yeah. It's Gong Gong's friends and family. Yeah. Mommy. Yeah, it's for family. You're Gong Gong's family. Yeah, that's a microphone. Okay. I think someone else had a story they wanted to tell, honey.
Ready to go. I think we're next. So my name is C.R. Sakeley, and I've known Alan for about 40 years. We met taking the same engineering classes at MIT, and we were lab partners in some very challenging laboratories, staying up all night, night after night, trying to get our project to work. We later became housemates. Our senior year of college, we lived together. And I remember playing with Alan's undergraduate thesis, which was a set of towers that had multicolored lights rigged up to a microprocessor that would certainly seem primitive today, but we thought it was pretty cool at the time. We sat around for hours playing with that, making our own custom light shows. And I always felt that Alan was one of the few people on this planet who got me. We had a very deep connection, and he would finish my thoughts for me. If he were here right now, he would take this thing that's in my head and articulate it better than I could for the rest of you. And a couple stories about Alan really stand out for me. Sometime around, I don't know, the early 90s, I was at a party somewhere. I was talking to someone that I'd never met. Alan wasn't there. This was a different circle of friends entirely. And this person that I was chatting with, he said, yeah, I'm an artist, and I make electronic sculptures. And I said, oh, really? Well, I have a friend who does that too. Maybe you two know each other, and my friend is Alan Rath. And the guy's jaw just hit the floor. Alan Rath invented this genre. He pioneered this form of art. And it just gave me a different kind of appreciation, sort of an outsider's appreciation of Alan's accomplishments. There's one other story that I want to share with you before I pass it over to my wife, Alexandra. And that is shortly after graduation from MIT, Alan took a rather conventional engineering job, and he held that job for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months. And he quickly grew rather disillusioned with the corporate world and what that did with his time versus what he wanted to do with his time. And so his life was at this critical juncture. And seeking some guidance where to go next, Alan threw the I Ching. And the Ching revealed to him the first hexagram. And that first hexagram is the creative. And Alan interpreted that as his sign from the universe that he should ditch this corporate world, pursue his passion and interest in art, and make that his path in life. And of all the people I know, perhaps more than any, Alan had the courage and the wherewithal to set aside that relatively secure engineering role that he could have easily excelled at, and instead pursue his own way, a more difficult way, and a more challenging way. And Alan, the world's a better place for you having been in it. Thank you.
Well, I met Alan after CR did, I guess, back at MIT. I think Alan introduced me to today.
Yes.
And so we were friends back then. I just wanted to build these light sculptures. You know, that was just what he had a passion for, and I thought that was really cool. And it's always fun watching things develop. And I'm sorry, yeah, he was a really special friend back then. When I came out to California in 1987, he was already here. He picked me up at the airport and he was driving me to my new home, and he just loved beauty. He loved the beauty of the Bay Area so much. He talked about that a lot, and I just remember like he would have such a simple way of saying things, and as we were driving over Berkeley Hills, he just gestured to the hills that were green then and said, those hills will turn brown in the fall. And he was explaining to me about the seasons, but just very simply the way he said that, just his observations, his love of beauty. He talked about riding his motorcycle across the Bay Bridge and just seeing the bay and the views from there, and how much he loved that. I knew him to be very clear, as we all did, about his decisions, large and small, about his life. Like that, about the motorcycle, which he loved riding so much. At a certain point, he looked up the statistics about motorcycle, not just deaths. He wasn't so worried about dying. He was worried about being maimed for life, and that didn't look good to him. And so he told me one day he had decided to stop riding his motorcycle. He thought he had beaten the odds so far. That was good. He was glad he had done it. He was done. That just seems very Ellen to me. Just making a decision and about like that. And I was thinking about the house he bought in West Oakland when he, it was part of his decision to leave the relatively secure engineering job and launch himself as an artist. He needed a place to live. He needed low expenses. He bought the house he could afford to pay for in cash and fix up with his own hands. And he did that. And it was a neighborhood that was dicier than many people would want to live in, but he was fine there. He got along with the neighbors. He made his way in the community there. And he fixed up that house beautifully. And every little detail was purely Alan, just fixing up an old house. I remember one thing where there was a downspout that had been poorly placed before him, and it kind of overlapped window trim and sills and this and that. And he had looked at that, and instead of just painting it all white, he painted it all the different colors that it passed over to make it sort of blend in. And it was funny. And it was just like his sculptures. It was just simple, no big deal, but that downspout, I just laughed when I saw it, and it was just him. We all loved him, Willis, and really appreciated so much having him on it.
Thank you so much for sharing. We know how much you meant to him too. And thank you everybody who's sharing your messages in the chat. I can't wait to read all of them. We have 2 more people who are going to speak. I think Tammy's next.
Hello everyone, my name is Tammy. I've had the privilege of knowing Alan about 6 years. I met him through Mia. I was his personal trainer, and I was fortunate to see Alan twice a week for the last 6 years. I tried to write some notes down so that I wouldn't ramble. The first thing I want to say is that quite a few of you don't know me, but I've heard about you because Alan talked about you. I don't remember all of your names, but I know he had a friend in LA that would come up and help him that he was really happy about. He had friends in Asia. He talked about Mia constantly. I never met Woody and Tally, but he talked about Woody and Tally all the time. And of course, his grandbabies and his son-in-law. So he loved his family and he loved his friends. Alan and I had lots of conversations at 6:30 in the morning, Tuesdays and Thursdays, about faith and whether there was or was not a God. We won't go into all of that. We talked about politics, and we had lots of interesting debates. He introduced me to Frank Zappa, and then also a bunch of weird music that I don't know if anyone ever listened to it other than Alan and the person who wrote it. But one of the things I appreciate about him, besides his, what did I write down here? Alan was courageous and he worked hard. He kept coming to me when he was, the only reason he stopped coming to me was because of the coronavirus. If it wasn't for COVID, he would have kept coming. And I would save him a parking space. I would go out and meet him and help him inside. And towards the end, we would just do stretching. But up until like a year ago, we were doing weight training, and he was doing everything he could to try to stay as strong as he could and stay as flexible as possible. He was very loving towards me, very concerned about me and my business, and also very supportive of me. I spoke with him just a few weeks ago. He sent me a really nice text message, and I would consider Alan a very good friend of mine. What else did I write about him? That was pretty much it. I just wanted to share that briefly because he became a really constant weekly part of my life, and I'm going to miss him very much. And I love you, Mia, and I'm sad for your loss, all of you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tammy. I can't express how much we appreciate you and how you gave Alan a reason and support to try to stay as physically healthy as he could while he was battling MS. And while, yeah, we never got to meet you, we definitely knew who you were, and he talked about you a lot. And I don't know, maybe someday I hope we can meet. But thank you for sharing. That meant a lot. And I think we have one final person who's going to share some memories. Rosalind?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I may not be able to get through this because this has been a very emotional experience. But I feel so grateful to be able to thank you because you made Alan really continue to live it in my heart. I have the good fortune of having a wonderful piece of Alan's. And though we really had not ever met, I think I met him once, I knew that there was something that had all the elements that everybody's been talking about. And it just, this morning has been so revelatory, and that it just embeds Alan and his life in our family. I have a wonderful piece of Alan's, which is a pair of eyes. And though I was always attracted to his work when I saw it, when I saw those eyes, I thought, that's my husband. That's my husband. And unfortunately, my husband had passed away. But those eyes live in my house. And they're filled with curiosity and joy, and reach out to everybody, very empathetic and fun. So I just want to thank you. This has been such a wonderful experience for me. And I just want to thank you, Tali, and your family. And I hope we have a chance to meet in person sometime. It will be a pleasure. Really, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosalind. That was a really beautiful story. And I appreciate you sharing how Alan's work has kind of inspired you and has a presence in your life. And, like we have here with Alan, he'll continue to be with us through his artwork and inspire us through his work and live on in our memories. So that concludes the virtual memorial ceremony. Thank you all so much for joining. It really means the world to us, and we know that it means a lot to Alan too. He would have really, really appreciated it. And keep in touch. You can always email me, email any of us, share stories, share memories, and we can keep talking about him and remembering him together. Thank you all.
Thank you.